Between the mountains stood an ancient palace. Legend said that within it lay a garden unlike any other, where flowers bloomed like mirrors. These mirrors did not only reflect faces, but revealed glimpses of the future. But be careful, for the legend also warned that whoever looked too long would never escape their reflection. One evening, two friends, Oliver and Grace, entered the palace. The sun was sinking, casting golden rays across the broken windows. The air carried a strange fragrance, as though thousands of flowers were waiting to bloom. At the heart of the palace, they discovered the garden. The petals of its flowers glimmered like glass. Each flower held a tiny mirror that shimmered beneath the rising moonlight. Grace whispered in awe, "Oliver, this looks like magic. It's so beautiful." Then she noticed something odd. The reflections within the mirrors seemed to be moving slightly, as though the faces trapped inside were struggling to break free. But surely that was impossible, right? And yet there was something unsettling about those reflections. Grace shivered and pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Let's just admire it from a distance," she suggested. "It wouldn't be wise to disturb them." Oliver, however, couldn't resist the allure of the mirrors. He stepped closer and gazed into one of the mirrors. At first, he saw his own reflection staring back, but then the image shifted and changed. He saw himself years older, standing in a strange place. He was dressed in fine clothes, but he was utterly alone. No one else was around him. A chill ran down Oliver's spine. This is my future," he stammered. Grace leaned toward another mirror. At first, she saw herself laughing joyfully. Beside her was Oliver, and they were both sharing a picnic basket filled with wine and bread. It was a vision of happiness and contentment. But the scene before her darkened. She watched as she and Oliver sat together, but were no longer looking at each other. Were both trapped inside the glass. Her hands were pressed against it, as though she were trying to claw her way out. And Oliver was reaching for her, his face filled with desperation, but he, too, was trapped. And then there was only her again, desperately clawing at the glass. The image of her trapped self began to fade, replaced by a twisted mockery of a smile. Grace stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. "What does it mean?" she whispered, turning to Oliver. But his eyes were wide with terror, fixed on the mirror before him. His reflection had changed. The older man was now kneeling on the ground, reaching out to Oliver with pleading eyes. His mouth was contorted in a silent scream. "Help me," the reflection cried, his voice echoing in the garden. "Don't let it consume me." A sudden gust of wind rustled through the leaves, and the whispering started. The voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Once you see your future, your reflection owns you. Once you see your future, your reflection owns you." The mirrored flowers trembled, and the faces inside the reflections began to stir. Some were contorted in pain, while others gleamed with triumph. "We have to get out of here," Grace exclaimed, grabbing Oliver's arm. But his eyes were still locked on the mirror, and he didn't seem to hear her. The whispers grew louder. "Your reflection owns you. Your reflection owns you." Grace pulled at him again, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please, Oliver, we have to go." He finally tore his gaze away from the mirror, and for a moment his eyes were clear. But as she looked into them, the light faded, replaced by a cold, distant stare. Grace gasped. There was no longer any trace of warmth or life in his eyes. He looked like a puppet, his face a mask devoid of emotion. "Why are you still here?" Oliver asked. His voice sounded hollow and distant, as though he were speaking from far away. "I don't understand what's happening to you," Grace whispered, backing away from him. "I think it's the garden," she said, glancing at the flowers. "It's doing something to us." But Oliver shook his head slowly, and a cruel smile spread across his lips. "No, Grace, it's not the garden. It's me." He took a step towards her, and Grace stumbled back. "You don't understand," she cried. "We have to get out of here before it's too late." The voices echoed again, this time with triumph. "Too late, too late, it's too late." Oliver's smile widened, and he reached out a hand to her. His touch sent a jolt of ice through Grace's body. It was as if she were touching the coldest stone. "Come with me, Grace," he said, his voice like the whisper of dead leaves. "We belong here now." She backed away from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "No, Oliver, this isn't you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you recognize me? It's me, your best friend." "I know who you are," he replied, his eyes gleaming with a strange light. "You're my reflection, Grace, and I've been waiting for you." With that, he lunged for her. Grace screamed and fled, racing through the maze of mirrored flowers. Behind her, she heard Oliver's laughter, echoing and cold. As she ran, she could feel the presence of her reflection gaining on her. She dared not look back, but she could sense its icy touch growing closer. Suddenly, she stumbled and fell, scraping her palm on a stone. Blood trickled down her fingers, staining the ground. Grace looked up in horror as a thorny rose bush loomed over her. Its black roses seemed to writhe in the moonlight, their petals dripping with crimson. A low voice hissed from within the thorns. "Lost, little dove." Grace recoiled in fear. "Please," she whispered, scrambling back. "Help me." A figure emerged from the shadows, and Grace's heart skipped a beat. It was Oliver, or what remained of him. His skin was ashen, his eyes glowed with an eerie light, and his lips curled into a cruel smile. "I thought you couldn't escape me," he said, his voice like shards of glass. "But you brought this upon yourself, Grace." "I don't want to hurt you, Oliver," Grace pleaded. "I never did anything to you." "You don't remember?" Oliver asked, his smile widening. "How could you forget? You were always jealous of me, of my beauty, my charm, my intelligence." "It's not true," Grace cried. "I would never hurt you." "Oh, but you did," Oliver hissed. "When you stared into the mirror and saw our futures, you saw only darkness ahead for me, so you did what you could to change it." "I never," Grace began, but Oliver cut her off. "Don't lie to me, Grace. I know you touched the mirror after me. You saw my fate and decided to take control." "It wasn't me," Grace insisted. "Someone or something is controlling him," she whispered, glancing at the rose bush. "Whatever it is, it's still here." A deep voice rumbled from the shadows. "You are mistaken, child. It is me." The black roses unfurled, revealing a pale hand. Then a face emerged, beautiful yet cruel. "You shouldn't have come here, children. Now you must pay the price." "Who are you?" Grace cried. "Why are you doing this?" The woman smiled coldly. "I am the garden, and those who trespass must serve as its prisoners, condemned to wander its paths for eternity." "But why?" Grace whispered. "Because you sought knowledge of the future," the garden hissed, "and in doing so, broke the sacred law." As the garden closed in on Grace, she knew it was futile to resist. She had become trapped forever in the garden of mirrors, along with Oliver, whose lifeless eyes stared vacantly into the abyss, reflecting nothing but emptiness. For they had gazed too long into the mirrors, and the garden had claimed them as its own.